Welcome to Anything But Ordinary, the podcast that explores the extraordinary world behind the world, the unordinary people and businesses that create the extraordinary bubble around high-profile lives. I am Zoe Jackson, and in each episode I sit down with inspiring individuals, from founders and creators to pioneers and disruptors, who are redefining success and carving out their own paths in business and in life. We dive into the personal challenges, triumphs and turning points that make their journeys anything but ordinary. This show is your reminder that success isn't one size fits all, and life really is anything but ordinary. Welcome to the Anything But Ordinary podcast, and here today I have with me Holly Matthews, former actress, Waterloo Road, Byker Grove, doctors, mum of two.
Yes.
Widowed.
Yeah.
And a founder of the Happy Me Project, a self-development coach. And the Happy Me Project is a self-development online membership.
It is.
And in person.
Yeah, and in person, and books and events and all of the things. It's become bigger than just where it started, of course.
Podcaster, speaker, an award-winning book. So that was the Happy Me Project, an award-winning book.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, it is.
It is. And I'm so delighted you're here today.
Thank you.
And we're going to talk about the Happy Me Project. We're going to talk about, everything that you've done, everything you're doing, and also your book that's out now, which is amazing. To Find Your Confidence.
We just displayed it just neatly there, like just, little product placement.
Which I have started listening to. I actually downloaded it as an audiobook, because I love listening to audiobooks.
Yeah, people do, and it's definitely important because we're all on the go, and it is my voice, whether you like that or not. It's my voice.
No, it's a very good voice. Very listenable.
It is always fun to do the audiobook. It's always nice to do the audiobook because it tends to be one of the last things that you do. And so I've written the book, it's gone through all the editing process, and it's usually really near it coming out. And by then, if I'm being really honest, I've forgotten what I wrote.
Yeah.
So by the time I get to the audiobook, I'm quite excited by what I wrote, because then I go and I'm like, this is good.
Yeah. Good.
This is actually quite good. Oh yeah, I forgot I thought that. So it's new. It's kind of nice for me when we do that, because I'm like, oh yeah, actually remember what I wrote now, because it's a long process to write the book itself. So I'm glad that you've got the audiobook. I hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, I've got the audiobook, and then I'll definitely take the hard copy and absolutely do that as well.
Gift, so you can take that.
Thank you, Holly. Well, look, we always start the podcast with something that I think you'll find quite easy to deliver, which is a piece of extraordinary advice or unordinary advice that maybe someone gave to you at some point in your life that has maybe been kind of your hallmark, or a framework to something and continued on. So,
well, I would say, as you can imagine, I have lots, and it would depend on what day you ask me this. But as I think this is probably something that has encapsulated my whole life, and it is a Geordie saying, a Geordie phrase from Newcastle upon Tyne, which is "shy bairns getting out."
What? Shy bairns getting out?
Shy bairns getting out.
No idea. What does it mean?
Shy bairns so a bairn in the north is a kid, basically. It means kid. And obviously shy bairns getting out. Now means nothing. So essentially, if you don't ask, you don't get.
Yeah.
And I grew up with that as a saying, shy bairns getting out. And the other one was grasp the nettle, meaning just, do the things that feel hard, feel difficult, feel uncomfortable. And both of those things very much are, and the essence of what I grew up with. So put yourself out there, ask for things that you want.
Yeah.
And it's all I've ever done my whole life. And of course, sometimes you get what you want, sometimes you don't. But actually, a surprising number of times when you ask for something that you want, you actually do get it. Or you might not get it straight away, but you might get it in the future, because now everybody knows that's what you want and what you want to do. So I would say that's probably the best bit of advice, and it really does run through everything that I've ever done. Even now, when I'm feeling a little wobbly, or I think, I don't know what I'm doing next, I just think about what you want, and then go and ask a person how to do that, or go and ask a person if you can have that, or put yourself forward, because it's served me well.
Yeah.
In historically, it served me well. So I work with that.
It's like going forward with intention, setting that intention
Absolutely.
and going forward with it.
The thing is, most people don't talk about the things that they want. They talk about things they don't want. We moan, we whinge, we complain, and we teach our brain
so
to
true.
seek more of the same, right? And so once you start to talk about the things that you want, you get your brain to work with you, because then your brain starts to look for those things. It looks for opportunity. It looks for ways to make that happen. If we imagine our brain like a Google, right?
Yeah.
We keep feeding in negative stuff. We keep feeding in, I don't want this. This is not what I want. I can't have this. People like me. All the negative stories we tell ourselves. We feed that into our Google, of our brain. Our brain will seek out in all of the information, and we take in 4.1 billion bits of data per second.
It's crazy.
So a lot of information coming in. So when that information's coming in, our brain's doing its Google search of, Holly believes that she's, let's say I'm really negative. I don't believe I'm very good at stuff. I can't have this. I can't have that. She doesn't want this. It seeks out more information to confirm that as a reality. So the minute that we go, I want this, even if we've got no idea how to do that thing, we say, I want to write a book. I want to have a successful business. I want to fall in love. Whatever it is in any area of our life, we say it to ourselves first. But actually, I think that's the hardest thing, admitting what you want. The next scary bit is telling other people, holding yourself accountable.
Holding yourself accountable. It's a big one,
It's
definitely.
huge.
If you
And
put
it's
it out there.
terrifying, isn't it? The first time I ever said my first book, I said to a friend of mine who runs a marketing agency, and we were talking about, next steps for me and what I wanted to do. And I said, I want to write a book. And I want to write a book that's with a huge publisher, one of the big ones. I don't want to just self-publish. Both are valid, both are important, but I didn't want to. And this is how I want it to look. And it felt terrifying to say that, because I didn't have a clue how to do that. I'd never done that before. I didn't know the route. But once I'd said it, there was that level of accountability. And the minute you start to talk about that stuff, things happen. I then put that specific one on Instagram. I said, I'm going to write a book. When I went and did...
Very brave. Just
Really?
putting it out there. Yeah, I think...
was terrified.
Yeah.
Because I thought, people, then I've got to do that as well. And when I went to the first or second time I went to speak to Lorraine Kelly on her show, the producer said to me, you should write a book. And I said, I'm going to. Can I come back and talk about it? And I had not written a book.
That was great PR. I love it. It's just like, yes, straight in there.
Like, let's just do it. But all of those things, they felt really uncomfortable, and I didn't know how to do it. I didn't have a strategy. I didn't have some great plan. I just thought, I would like to do that. I'll work it out.
Yeah.
And I think once we do that, our brain seeks opportunity. When I put that on Instagram, I got a message off an editor who was at Bloomsbury Publishing, one of the big boys. I didn't know she was following me, and she probably didn't know I wanted to write a book till I said it. And then she messaged me and said, would you like to put a proposal to me? And
isn't that just insane how that can work? Just by going forward with an intention, putting it out there, and then somehow it just all comes together. Of course, it's so much hard work.
Yeah.
But the accountability for that, and then, like you say, people being in the right situation.
Planting seeds. If we just keep planting seeds and we keep showing up and we keep talking about the things we want, we keep reminding ourselves that is what I want and it is available to me because it's been available to people before, so why not me?
Yeah.
We keep doing that. Eventually, the universe moves out of our way and we get the things.
Yeah.
And I really do believe that. And when I, share the things that I've done, it'd be easy to think that, and this goes for anybody that's had any success in any type of business, it'd be easy to think, well, they're just a little bit special. There's something different about them.
Yeah.
And it's not true.
Or that they were very, very lucky.
Or that they were lucky.
Yeah.
And I've had that as well. It must be lucky for you because, you must be easier for you because you were on TV. Yeah, but I got the job on TV because I wrote to the producer at 11 years old and asked for a job. So, and I didn't come from, my dad was a welder.
And I love that you wrote to the producer because it goes back to the advice that you were given as a child, which is if you don't ask, you're not going to get it.
Absolutely. And I was the one thing you're always lucky is where you're born, right? You're lucky which family you're dropped into. And I was very lucky in that I've got a family that let me be. They knew I was a weird little kid who just wanted to do her own thing, and they allowed me to do that, and they allowed me to be. And when at 10, 11 years old, I said, I want to write a letter to the producer of Byker Grove, They didn't go, no, you're not get a proper job. They went, all
Go
right,
for
then,
it. Go for it.
So, you know.
So there you go. So it kind of almost feels quite organic that you've got here to write in a book about confidence.
100%. Yeah. It feels like a full circle thing, I think. Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about the book then, because obviously people may know you, or probably do know you from your acting days. Probably not as much if they haven't put the two together, perhaps.
Yeah, for sure.
For the fact that you're now...
the book itself really brings together the two sides of my work.
Yeah.
So for me, acting and self-development sit very hand in hand. And I've always said, like, in fact, I was asked this question once when I went to drama school for an audition. I remember the person who was auditioning me asked me, so why do you want to be an actor?
Yeah.
I've never thought about it before because just because I do. And then I took a moment to think about it. And this sits very hand in hand as to why I think they go alongside each other. And I said, because I'm interested in people and I like knowing why we do things, and I like walking in other people's shoes and getting to know who they are, and then as an actor pretending to be them. As a self-development coach, I'm not pretending to be my clients, I promise. But it's a similar process. And for me, I did self-development for such a long time, but just for me, because it was hard being an actor and it was hard being in the public eye. It was hard being the weird kid off the telly when I went to school. And I was working on all that myself so that I would feel more confident and I would believe in myself. And so for me, this book I've done it as 9 chapters. Each area is an area that we may dip in confidence. So public speaking, social situations, standing up for yourself, appearance, being a parent, starting something new. What else have we got? There's more in there that I've not.
The inner narrative, like the inner narrative, when you're talking about that at the beginning, I think so many people will relate to that inner narrative that tells you.
The inner critic.
The inner critic, but it can be anything, you know, even if you suffer with some types of anxiety, although there are other psychological things that go into that, there is a lot of that narrative that you're telling yourself.
Stories are
things.
everything. And you know, even just the fact that we're having this conversation on a podcast, like stories are everything, and stories are very related for me in terms of, I've always said that I'm a storyteller. I'm a storyteller when I'm acting, when I'm singing, when I'm writing, whatever it is, it's about telling stories because that's how we connect and that's how we make sense of the world, right? We take something that's happened, and each of us, you and I are in this room right now, both live in this experience, but we've both got our own narrative of what this is in our head. And that fascinates me. Like, we're both here at this point. The room is the same, the lights are the same, the mics are the same. We're both sat here, but we're having a different experience based on what we've lived previously, what happened before we came in this room, how we're feeling, all of those things. So it is always about stories. And so in here, you know, I've certainly interwoven my own stories, some of my clients' stories, and I've essentially done it so that each chapter has external and internal confidence tools and ideas. So the external is from my acting world. I know how to look confident. I know how to pretend.
This is interesting because I think people would assume 2 things. Okay, you're either a confident person or you're not a confident person. And also for yourself in particular, being an actress, surely you must be confident. You fall into the confident person group. Yeah.
And all of that is essentially just a bit of nonsense that we tell ourselves. So I will tell you that firstly, the majority of actors that I know, even if they're strictly speaking extroverts, have had issues with confidence and probably have sat on the what would be when I say the word, like the outside of a lot of society in some ways. There is a lot of neurodivergent people that are actors, so they tend to feel a little bit alien in the normal world. That's certainly for me how acting really resonated with me, because when I was in the acting world I didn't feel weird. Makes sense now. I understand that most of them were neurodivergent, so then of course it didn't feel weird. They were all a little bit quirky, and so I didn't feel out of the ordinary. A lot of actors enjoy hiding behind a character.
Yes.
They enjoy performing. And for me, for a long, long time, I was really good at pretending. I was really good at this confident character that I had curated, essentially. Like, I learned, and now I understand myself more, I understand why that happened. I did feel a bit of and so I have ADHD, and I always felt like an alien. I knew I was different to those around me. I knew I was processing things differently. And I was lucky that my parents took me to, they actually took me to an acting class called Sit and Fidget, which is hilarious now.
Okay.
Looking back, I'm like, makes sense that the ADHD kid went to sit and fidget.
Yes.
Like, wonder why that was. Everyone there was fidgeting probably. But when I learned, if I act like this, I get this response from the world. So I learned to act like the popular kid at school, and I learned how to do my makeup in the way that would make me fit in, and my hair, and I was great at doing this character externally. Internally, I felt completely disconnected. I knew I wouldn't fit in really. I knew that they were responding to this version of me that I'd created. So I know that works. Now that doesn't work for your anxiety levels. It doesn't work for you feeling good long term or really making proper connections.
No.
But when you bring the two together, and this is what this book was about, I've got internal and external. So the internal is the mindset work, the work that I've learned, intuitive psychology, NLP, hypnosis, all of that stuff, bringing that in, but also saying, let's not pretend that you can learn all of the internal stuff, and that's the most important stuff. But if you still show up looking like the unconfident version of you, the world will respond the same. You won't get any different response.
Absolutely, because there is an element, and I know you do touch upon it in the book, and it's something that I've kind of, I absolutely agree with, and I have definitely installed in my life, is a fake it till you make it, but like you say, with the inner work as well.
It's a contentious phrase. Fake it till you make it. I'm telling you, it works. I will say to nearly all my clients, go delulu, have delusional goals. Set goals that are wild, that you can't even understand how you'll make that happen. Go for that. Assume the best in that way, and pretend, act as if. I talk a lot about that in the book, but act as if. That's a tool that actors use. So if I'm an actor and I'm playing a part, I'm going to act as if I was that character. I'm going to be in whatever scene I'm in and act as if. But for us as people, we can use that same thing. If we want to go into a work presentation and be the best version of ourselves doing that, we've got to think, well, what does the best, most confident version of me look like? Or if we can't imagine ourselves, thinking, if I can think of somebody else as a role model, what would they do? A good mirror to think about, and to create that version of me. Well, I'll act as if this. Well, you show up with a different energy, a different intention. Hopefully your body language is shifted slightly to act as if. And it doesn't mean faking it or pretending to be something different to what you are. But the more we can integrate the two and recognize that even with all of our human flaws and messes and all of that, we're still amazing, and we can bring that to the front a little bit more as well. But it's bringing those two things together. So the book for me is a real full circle thing, because I not only... I've lived and breathed this myself. I have, and I still, and I say this at the very beginning of the book, I am not always confident. People assume that because they see a version of me. But I would say that I'm an extrovert, and it is not about introvert, extrovert. You can be a confident introvert. You just need a break from people at the end of the day. I do say in the book, and I've changed my opinion slightly on it, I do say I always thought I was an introvert that was a confident introvert.
It's funny you say. I feel the same. Like I say,
because I never knew where I sat on it. But I actually think that I'm an extrovert who extroverts too hard. So then I retreat because I've had enough of people and I need a break. So I think when I'm being myself, I'm like this big version of myself, and then I tire myself out, and then I need to go and retreat. So I feel like sometimes that's an introverted thing where you reboot by being away from people. But I also like being around people. And I don't think, just to answer your question about being born with it, I don't think we're born, I think we are all born with the ability to be a confident version of us. As I say, some will be more extrovert, some will be more introvert. There's a dollop of genetics in there, of course, but it isn't like, you come out of the womb and they're like, this one's got a little trait of more confidence.
And there's parenting that goes into that as well.
For sure. Nature, nurture, all of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I do think it is interesting. You don't have to be, just because you're an extrovert doesn't mean you're always confident. Because people do assume because you're an extrovert or because you've got a bubbly personality that you are an extrovert, therefore you are a confident person.
But every new space that you go into, it's new, right? So whenever or when you up level a bit, so when you do well and you have a success, you get put into newer spaces where you suddenly have all of that imposter stuff that shows up. I'm not supposed to be here. Who am I to be here? And I'm sure
we've all had it.
We've all had it, right? You start a podcast and you do a podcast and suddenly you feel more unsure.
I think it's not a podcast. I'm going to do a podcast. I set out the intention.
Exactly.
I do the podcast and I think, what am I doing?
Exactly.
I'm a total imposter. Yeah.
So, but that's, I mean, I think that's a positive thing. I think when we're always growing, we're always evolving. I don't think that's a bad thing. And something that really, I talk about a lot in the book is getting comfortable with being uncomfortable. That's something I have cultivated, the ability to be okay with making a fool of myself, be okay with failure. I mean, as an actor, you have so many rejections. It's unbelievable, even with successes, that you have to kind of get used to that.
It's
That's
an important
definitely the
one.
training ground, yeah.
Absolutely. It's a really important one, getting used to failure as well, because as you say, no one can get it right all the time and you're going to fail.
Yeah.
But if you never put yourself out there to fail, how are you ever going to know if you can succeed?
You just won't. You
Absolutely
can't.
not.
And all of the people that we watch and we see and we think, they've gone from 0 to 100 and they're doing amazing. They had so many little missteps along the way.
Yeah.
Even those that seemingly, have an overnight success, there's another story around that. Even if they've got great marketing, there's another story around that where there was failures.
Absolutely. And now, Holly, you were diagnosed. You were diagnosed with ADHD.
Yeah.
How long ago was that diagnosis?
So I've forgotten, but I think it was like said before. But it wasn't the time for it, was it? So I did not receive that thought very well. So I think being in the spaces that I have been in, I'm around people who are psychologists or in mental health. And it was so sort of thrown at me a couple of times as I, in my early 20s, you have ADHD. And I was like, no, I don't. I'm not a naughty boy.
Yes, because I think that's the kind of misconception with it. Yeah.
We just didn't have the knowledge. And so I didn't know what that meant. I had the stigma that a lot of people will have around that. And it was only really, as it is with a lot of parents, when I started so my husband Ross died, which is why I have to mention that because it was past tense. I'm going to say he was autistic. Obviously, I'm not. Okay. If he was alive, I would not be saying he was autistic. So just to explain that. So he was autistic, and my oldest daughter Brooke has an autism diagnosis as well. And when we were starting to explore things for her, we didn't know whether it was grief, anxiety, autism, ADHD, but we knew that there was things that were different. And her psychiatrist that she'd seen for grief did say a few times early on, I think there's some traits of dad here. I'm not sure. And as we, as she grew up, we started to notice things. And so we went down that pathway of exploration, a very open exploration. Like, we did not know what it was going to be, and we were very open to any answers. But as we started to explore that stuff and look at each avenue, the neurodivergent stuff, I was very confused as to why a lot of the stuff was weird.
Yeah.
And we would go through things and they would say, well, she does this. And I was like, I do that. And that, I do that. And they were like, yeah, okay. And it was actually kind of a few things that sort of happened that kind of made me go, I think I need to look at this. Because if I'm expecting my child to explore her own brain, and I'm negating that feels like a piece of the puzzle that I'm not looking at.
Yeah.
And when you're doing the work that I do, that's what it's about. It's about being the detective of your own mind, right? And understanding yourself.
Absolutely, yeah.
And I always knew. In fact, when my husband was diagnosed, because he was diagnosed as an adult, he was diagnosed at 26, which makes sense in our generation. And at school, he was seen as naughty, he was seen as difficult, he was seen as difficult, he was seen as, all of those things. And even when he was diagnosed, I remember thinking, I wonder if I sit on that, if I'm autistic. But then everything I certainly at the time read about autism, I was like, I can maintain eye contact, all the old fashioned sort of, I'm not that literal, I don't know if but I definitely was even then questioning, I think there's something else, but we just didn't have the knowledge. And then when I went through the process of it, it was really fascinating because obviously you have to look back on your childhood, and I asked my parents things that perhaps I hadn't asked them before. And the answers did surprise me, I'll be honest. I did look back and go, and everyone thought that was fine, did they? You know, they're like, my mum was like, oh yeah, you used to, you'd be reading and drawing and being creative for hours until you wet yourself when you were like sort of 7, 8, 9, 10. I'm like, excuse me, what?
Yeah.
So I would wet myself. Everyone was fine with that. And she was like, yeah, but you were just doing stuff and you just would forget to go. And I'm like, yeah, we think that's probably...
We just didn't talk about it back then. It wasn't recognised. We didn't know.
No blame on it. We didn't know. Just no one did they?
No one did. And I think like now there is so much talk about it, which is fantastic. But what I think also really helps is that because we're talking about it so much, it allows people to understand, like you say, how they tick, how their brains work. Yeah. And then it kind of loops back, like you say, complete full circle to how to own your confidence within that. You know, okay, you're not weird. You're not strange.
You fit perfectly well in that that brain type. That makes perfect sense. When we try and squeeze ourselves to be something we are not, and it's not better or worse, it's just a different processing. Yeah. And once we do that, we feel so much better with ourselves. Because for a lot of people, particularly neurodivergent people, before they are diagnosed, they hold so much anxiety inside trying to fit in. I'm not saying this is exclusive to neurodivergent people. We all do this in different versions of this. But I'm saying the people that I've spoken to in my own experiences, that I held so much in that I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't sit like this. I shouldn't wear that. If I do that, they're going to think I'm weird. It's going to be a giveaway. I need to hold everything in. I need to, even things like live sessions like this, when I would be recording, or when this is live, but when I would do a live session and my brain would go somewhere else. Yeah. There would be so much embarrassment and shame with that. Whereas if I lost my train of thought with you now and I went off somewhere else, or I just glitched out, which happens. And I would say I've just glitched. I don't know where I went there. I'm back now. Yeah. I do that now. People who are in my membership, there will be times, particularly at the end of the day when my medication runs out, because I do take medication most days. When my medication runs out, my brain starts to it feels like my brain and my mouth are no longer connected. So sometimes I'll say something will fall out my mouth, and it's because my brain was going so fast, I can't catch up. And I will just now, I will just now say, right, 1 second. Yeah. I'm just going to calibrate my brain and mouth together again.
But that is great that you're just able just to say that. So rather than, like you say, hide it away.
Which I used to.
One of the things, I mean, I'm not diagnosed at all as neurodivergent, but I would go to lots of networking things, and I would forget people's names all the time. Yeah. Like I just, a lot of people being introduced at the same time. There's a lot of information going in your brain. And so I just learned to kind of go, I'm so sorry. I completely forgot your name. Can you remind me again? Yeah. Just having that confidence to go, oh, actually, do you know what? It's okay to say and be huge. Like, rather than feel that,
all that internal anxiety. Yeah. Well, I actually found that when I was diagnosed, and I was essentially what we would call unmasking, and I was going, I'm just going to lean into it more. I'm going to lean into it more. And I would say we can unmask regardless of neurodivergence, by the way. I think unmasking is also about leaning into a confidence of saying, I'm not going to remember your name. I'm so sorry. I always forget names. Or, it might be, I'm not good at maths, and so I can't do this. Or I'm not very good at spelling. I don't have a dyslexia diagnosis, but I'm not very good. Whatever it is, when we own our stuff, we feel so much better. But I found as I unmasked, I did have people saying, you seem like you're being more ADHD.
Oh, really?
Was really challenging for me because it was quite triggering. And actually what was happening was I was not pretending to be neurotypical. Yeah, I was not holding it in,
which must have been something you've practiced for such a long time. Yeah. Being an actress, you're great at it. You're great at wearing that mask.
Yeah, I was good, but it didn't feel good internally. And as I've, certainly over the last few years, I've lent into it even more. And I really encourage all of us to do that, because unmasking, as I say, it's not just about being neurodivergent. It's just going, I'm going to let myself off the hook here. This is part of my personality. And, sometimes we need to tweak aspects of who we are, the areas that need a little work. That's okay. But it shouldn't be done with judgment of ourselves, because we're all doing our best, right? Yeah. And certainly with my work, it does inform my work now. My first and second book, in the book, the way that I structured it, One, I didn't realize I'd done this, but in my first book, and again with this one as well, I made sure that everything was really easy to read, and probably can't say this on here, but I spaced each paragraph has a space between of the train of essentially it's where my thought changes. And I didn't realize that wasn't necessarily what most books do, that most books would just have and they have a little indent for a paragraph change, like a new paragraph. And my editor says to me, do you want to keep the spaces in? And I didn't realize that's how I always write like that. And I was like, well, if I'm going to read my own book, then because otherwise I won't be able to read it if it's all in one chunk like that. And the first book, and obviously new books just come out, so I'm just getting some responses to that. But I had people that have dyslexia and ADHD particularly who said, I've never read a book before, but I've read your book. And that was so amazing to me, because it meant that my work was accessible. And you said about the audiobooks as well, having it on audio. And even in my membership, I'm always looking at ways, how can I help there not be a barrier to entry, whatever your brain type? And I really hope that, if I'm being honest, in the next few years, maybe it'll take a little longer, but we're not even having to have these big conversations about it. Because quite honestly, it's almost boring at this stage. Like, we all have different brain types. It's okay.
Yeah, it's okay. Exactly. And it's
Do you remember that it was a Stonewall campaign for the LGBT community, and they had these signs that said, some people are gay, get over it. I want them to say, some people are neurodivergent, get over it. I'll do it. I did actually, my husband used to do printing. I got him to make, some people are Geordie, get over it.
Oh, really?
But I feel like maybe we need some new ones. I think we need just, some people are ADHD, get over it.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that big a deal. It's not that deep.
No, it's not a big deal. And it does cause a bit of a debate, I think, because some people will turn around, especially people that are really uneducated in it, will say, well, everyone's being diagnosed with it today. Everyone wants to go through a diagnosis.
Well, I spoke to I had a psychiatrist meeting this morning, funnily enough, just my sort of yearly check-in with the psychiatrist, medication, all of that stuff. And it was one of the conversations we were having. I said, it's unfortunate because we have, and this is me being on my soapbox here, but we do have GPs who don't understand it. They don't understand it because it's not their specialism. They're not psychiatrists. They're not educated in that. That's not their work. They should not be the gatekeepers of somebody else's exploration, in my opinion. The reason that I think people think everybody has ADHD is because those in places like this often have ADHD. People that do take risks, people who are entrepreneurs, people who are actors, singers, dancers. The people that are in our eyes, there is a high chance, a high probability, because of what that takes, that they might have a brain that works like that. That's just, statistically, that's how it is. If it's not channeled into something like this, it goes the other way. I went into a prison last week to do some sessions on confidence.
Wow.
Which was fascinating for me. And the reason I did it this month is ADHD month. And the prison population is like wildly high when it comes to being ADHD, because when people don't have a diagnosis, when people don't have a support and understanding of their brain, and they can't build their confidence in that, it can go the wrong way.
They can go the other way.
Yeah, so it's important that we know, and it's important that we let go of judgment of that. And comments like everybody's a little bit autistic or ADHD.
Yeah, I hate those comments.
It's foolish. No, they're not.
Absolutely not. Looping back to the book then, and kind of entwining with what I do as a business. So I run a recruitment agency. I get lots of people that, of course, go for interviews, candidates that are going for interviews. In my sector, it's often with really high profile people or very established business people that are going for these job interviews with. Yeah. Can be exceptionally nerve-wracking. Like it can be, I've been there myself, actually. I used to work in this sector as a private PA and as a house manager. So I remember going for the interviews and thinking, my God, the nerves beforehand to try and build the confidence. I know there's tips and tricks and everything is kind of in your book. But what would you say to someone that is going for an interview in that scenario?
Well, it's something I really have an interest in. There's a whole chapter on job interviews specifically, so people can delve into that. Yeah. And I like practical stuff as well. And for a long time, I worked with a company who were worked alongside one of the biggest headhunting companies in the UK. And my job was to go in with this company, and I would work with, your big top chiefs at Barclays Bank or like NatWest or like some of the, these often men, if I'm being honest, who had never been told no for a long time, and they were then going to go and do a job interview, so they were nervous. I would work with them, and so I would go in and we would work on job interview technique, and we work on how to present yourself, how to talk, the nerve side of everything. And I always found it fascinating because it's I would go in and I'd have these particularly these men who would be like, everybody thought they were super important, and they would be a gibbering wreck by the time I'd finished with them, and they'd be like, oh my God, this is the most nerve-wracking thing I've ever had to do. Because I'm going, John, why are you sitting like that? Why are your feet like that? John, why are you using it? No.
Oh no.
So I really, really find it fascinating, because I think it doesn't matter who you are. We all find that nerve-wracking.
Exceptionally.
When there's eyes on us, and this it goes back to our prehistoric times, really. Essentially, we think we're scared of being in that situation because it's eyes on us. And when eyes are on us, if we were cavemen and women, that would probably mean a predator was coming at us. So we have this inbuilt fear of people staring at us and, prove yourself. I think, key factors are, the obvious stuff is do all your preparation beforehand. I am, and again, this is acting side of things, I'm a big believer in scripting and practicing that script, because when we are nervous, we will speed up our talking. We try and get out of there. Our body language will be screaming, get me out of here. And we forget all of our words. So if we've practiced certain things, and that might be, it might be essentially summarising your CV is a big one. So I always say to people when they're working on a job interview, summarise your CV, maybe do it in 3 parts. This was where I started out, tick, 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 all the things that's, maybe it's a university or some big company you worked for. This is what I did before the job I'm in now. This is where I'm in now. And all you're going to be doing is naming all the things that are important to whatever space that you're in at that time. The reason this is really helpful, and I'm sure you know this, is because if you go in and you're just there nervous, twiddling your thumbs, waiting for them to ask questions, they will ask any random question, and they're probably going to pick a question that you don't want them to ask and you're not prepared to answer and you're nervous about. Whereas if you go, would it be beneficial if I summarised my CV?
You're starting the conversation.
You're starting it.
You're leading it. Yes.
You're putting the plates on the table. You're going, this is what we're going to talk about. So you're in control, and they will ask questions about that, and they rarely will say no to that.
And I think clients and people that are taking the interviews quite like that, because it shows that confidence. It shows that self kind of assurance that you know what you're talking about.
And also, statistically, they've taken 6 seconds to look at your CV, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, they look at profile and the last 2 jobs. And
do you know what my dad used to work in the oil industry, and his boss once said to him about, he was doing some recruitment for this job, and his boss said, do you know how he said, I only like to work with lucky people. He said, do you know how I work that out? And he took the pile of CVs and he took one pile and put it in the bin. When they're not very lucky. He said, this is lucky people. Oh, no. I mean, seriously.
That's one way of kind of filtering through CVs.
So, I mean, I'm not saying most people do that. My dad was he was a little bit, a bit wild. But my point is, people aren't necessarily spending the time we think they are. And a really important factor is the people interviewing you are as nervous as you. They're worried they're not going to get it right because their boss is somewhere, or if it's their company, they're worried they're not going to get it right. And actually, statistically, they're not very good at it.
No, actually, often when it's the clients, they're not particularly good at interviewing.
They're not. So they're probably nervous. They want to show up for them, and they want you to get the job. Yeah. Because if you get the job, they can go at the book.
Life is easy. Life
is done.
It's done.
So they're not. Don't go in there. This is not like what we see on TV where it's X Factor and they're judging you. They want you to get the job. They're on side. So I would say know your script of what you've done.
I like this. Yeah.
Think about questions that are potentially difficult questions. And don't be scared of difficult questions. One little technique I'll share, because I think this will be beneficial to your audience, is if you get a question you don't know the answer to, right? The panic we think about. We think ahead of time, we think, oh my God, if I get a question I don't know the answer, and that's it, I'm done for, right? You're not done for. They know that we're not going to know all of the answers. So this is something that I was taught a long time ago, and I always share it with my clients. If you get one that you don't know, you will say, I'm not sure I know the answer to that. And then you will pause, right? Because pausing looks like we're really thinky people, right? we're thinking.
Good.
So we pause, and then you say, but I can tell you how I would find out. And then you pause again because you're a thinking person. And then you name 3 things, let's say 3 things. I would Google it. I would ask my best friend.
Yes.
Whatever the thing is, it doesn't matter what it is, because all you're showing them is, I wouldn't sit there like a rabbit in headlights and not find a solution.
Yeah.
So you go, I don't know the answer to this. Pause.
Yeah.
But I will tell you how
it.
I can find out. And then you leave it there. So they're thinking, 1, this is not a liar. Right?
Yeah.
This is a person I can trust, because they didn't try and waffle and bullshit around it. They came up with something. They're a person that can be trusted, because they're not trying to say, I know the answer to everything. And it's just something to have in your mind when you go in, so that if it comes up, you're not going to stutter and stumble.
Absolutely, because I think that kind of question gets asked, framed slightly differently.
Yeah.
Often it could be, have you got experience in this particular thing? And it may not, maybe you just don't have that experience, but it's something you can learn, and you can learn and adapt. Of course.
Exactly that. You could say, well, I don't specifically have that, but
this is what I can do
this is what I can do.
Yeah.
And, I'm really interested in skilling up on this. So I'm going to, I could absolutely do a course, whatever it is, right? We can come up with something, but I think pausing's really important. People feel very uncomfortable with the pause because they think it's, it feels like a long time.
It feels just like silence. And like a long time as well, yeah.
But talking slower, I know as a person that talks at 3 billion miles an hour, it's rough of me to put this out there. But when I'm trying to, if I'm doing something where I want people to see me as higher status, and or intelligent in some way, or I want people to listen to what I'm saying, I will take a bit longer.
And does that come from acting, do you think, as well, that method?
Yeah.
For sure.
Because the minute that I start talking to you and I'm slowing down, maybe I'm speaking with few pauses, we start to get drawn in.
Yeah, I'm really engaging you when you slow down.
Why is this must be a really important point. So that's something that we can use. One last thing on body language for job interviews, because I love telling people this one, because they're always like, what? We want to see your thumbs, right?
Thumbs
are important. Let me explain, right? So going back to so we want to see hands on table. If we're at a table, get your hands on the table. We do not want to be sitting on hands, because you look deferential. You look like, why are our hands under the table? And the reason our person sitting opposite us won't know why. But subconsciously, we think, again, it goes back to us being, cavemen and women. When we were, potentially in danger, we needed to see what was in people's hands. Are they holding a weapon? Right.
Interesting.
So we need to see thumbs, because thumbs are important. So get your hands up, get your hands in that zone of influence. We can see them, and even if you're at a desk, clear the desk. Have your hands so they can see your hands, because there's a level of trust that is built when we see people's hands, and thumbs particularly.
What about elbows, though?
We can have them. I mean, I think so. How I'm sitting now, I didn't used to do that. That would have felt really weird. And a lot of people that are watching or listening will think, having your hands, this is our zone of influence. Because even when we're standing up, if our hands are sort of in our diaphragm area, we can see them. If I move them down, you can't see my hands, and you don't know why, but you see me as lower status and not quite as important.
It's bizarre, isn't it? How our brain works and how...
It's fascinating. Yeah. And I do this, I talk to my kids about this as well, and I say using your hands is important. Using your hands are your highlighter. So if you imagine your piece of paper when you do your highlighting, use your hands to help explain things, to help articulate points, because it helps the other person to listen and process what you're saying a little bit more. So, I mean, I remember working with this guy, it was an Italian guy. I don't remember what company.
Sure, he uses hands a lot.
Well, that's what I'm saying. So he said to me beforehand, I was like, so we're going to work on body language. And he said to me, well, I'm Italian, so, I use my hands all day, gesticulate. And I said, that's great. So I'm thinking this guy's going to be top. His hands look like this. So he's doing, and I'm like, no. I want you to expand your hands. So what I'll do with clients who are unconfident and need to work on body language, whether it's a job interview, whether it's at work, whatever the reason, is I get them, and your listeners can do this round the house.
Yeah.
Whatever you're doing. Let's say you're going to talk out loud about your CV. just to practice around the house. I want you to do big, over the top hand gestures, right? Really over the top. So like not what you're going to do in the interview, but go really big so that when you get to normal levels.
I can imagine me doing it, go whoosh.
I mean, I'm ridiculous. I'm so dramatic now. I don't care. But for some people, even just putting their hands on a desk feels. So you have to practice, and really, you know, so much of the book, the book is very much focused on the mindset side and the stories that we tell ourselves about why we can't have that job, or people like me don't have that. It's also the body language side of it as well. And I have seen one of my clients recently got an amazing job, and when she went for that job, she was saying, I've no reason being there. Like, I have no business being there. I don't know people's fancy titles, but it was a billion.
Very fancy.
It had billion pound something company in there. She was it was big, right? And she was saying to me before, I'm really nervous. And we talked through job interview technique. We talked about the confidence to just go for it, that go for delusional. Like, why not you? Yeah. Why is it not your turn? Who says? Everyone in every powerful position has probably thought, you know, it can't be me. And she went in for this, and it's actually it's her first day today. So Gillian, good luck. I hope she's
good luck.
She's doing amazing. And she said, I went in. I just thought, why not me? Why not? And she implemented all the things that we'd said, and she got the job. And I really just think, you know, you're never going to feel like you're definitely good. You're never going to feel perfect.
No.
You're always going to feel that discomfort. That's okay. It means you're growing.
Yeah.
It means we're developing and we're growing.
But I like it. It is a lot to do with the preparation. As you say, it's you know, preparing, doing a little bit of research, coming forward with that explaining your CV. So coming forward with explaining your past, explaining your background, putting it there before they've even asked the question. Yeah. Taking control and having the body language.
All of these. And remembering that it starts the minute you walk in the room. Like
from
even
a handshake and eye contact. Yeah. So important.
Smiling, how you sit in a waiting room really matters. There's tons in the book about that. You know, really thinking about it on the lead up to it, warming up your voice even. People don't think about this, but if you've not spoken all morning and you go to an interview, good morning. Like just all of that stuff matters, and most people won't do it.
No.
So if most people aren't doing it, and you have that little edge that you've practiced and you've walked around your house you've shown thumbs. I'm not talking about going in like this, by the way, but you've had your hands up there, you've practiced uncomfortable questions, all of that stuff. Well, you're miles ahead of most people.
Absolutely. I think my dad always used to say to me, not that I always took it on when I was growing up at school, but he used to say the 5 Ps. Have you heard of the 5 Ps?
Oh, tell me. Maybe I have.
It's like proper preparation prevents pissful performance.
Yes, I have heard of it. I love it.
I used to be like, yeah, okay, Dad, the 5 Ps. Never, ever did I prepare.
What's the other one? Preparation. And there was another one my husband used to say about when luck and preparation come together or something. That's where success. Someone's going to know what that quote is.
Yeah.
But it absolutely is that. You know, it's
quite simple, really, isn't it? It's quite simple.
Yeah. Prepare and show up for yourself. Ask for the things that you want. Put yourself forward for the jobs that you want. You won't get everyone. Get comfortable with that. That's okay. I worked out, and it's in this book, I think it was 158 jobs I've probably been rejected from.
No, I can't believe that, Holly.
And I still I've still done all of the stuff that you said. I've still worked for myself for all of my life. But acting jobs, I've had loads of knockbacks and also successes. You don't die of the knockback.
No, exactly. Get used to that failure, sit in it really comfortably and kind of own it, finding your confidence.
Absolutely.
So I'm so looking forward actually to implementing this. Some of my employees and also like people within the business, and for everyone listening as well, taking this on board and just kind of refresh if you need to refresh. It's a great book to read.
I hope so.
And if you've never done any self-development or you are looking to do some, definitely find your confidence.
Yeah.
Audiobook. And
if you come on social media, I always say, come and find me on social media. I'm very accessible, and I want you to win. Like I want people to win. Whatever you're doing, I want you to have a good life, and I'm always finding new ways to try to reach people and to get in. And I do say as well, if you've never done self-development before and you think it's going to be some woo-woo thing where I'm telling you to chant over crystals in Bali. You can do that.
You can do that, yeah.
You can do that. That sounds
fun.
lovely. It sounds fun. But I will bring the straight talking, no nonsense self-development. You can add your own religion, your own woo-woo. You can add all of that yourself. I'm not going to bring that. So if you have a friend that's very skeptical, you have the skeptical friend, but you think they really could do with this, you won't be embarrassed. You can give this book, and you can give my first book, and you can direct them towards me. And I think my sweary, very straight talking delivery, I think you won't be embarrassed. I mean, we're not for everybody, but I think, if somebody's just early doors looking at self-development, you're not chucking them in with, chanting over crystals and Reiki, which might be their next step. They might.
I think I might. Yeah.
You might do that.
I might do that as well. Yeah.
All of it, whatever makes us feel good.
Yeah. Well, Holly, thank you so much. Thank you for being with me today, chatting about the book. I've learnt loads, actually.
Good.
So much.
I've loved chatting to you. It's been great.
It's been great. So thank you.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
Thanks so much for tuning in to Anything But Ordinary. I hope the conversation gave you a little inspiration, maybe a new perspective, or just reminded you there's no such thing as a straight path when it comes to success. If you love what you heard, it would mean the world if you could follow, subscribe, or leave a little review. It really helps us keep sharing these incredible stories. And if you want to see more behind the scenes or get in touch, all the info you need is in the show notes. Until next time, keep being curious, keep challenging the ordinary, and remember, the most interesting lives rarely follow the rules.